Hello, Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Hope you're all safe, sound, and healthy. And now that we have touched a little upon elite capture and food colonization and, all that jazz, let's move on to a little more detail on France and the atrocities committed in its colonies, especially after, as because if you remember, I've kept on and on talking about this generally and summarily, um, that England, France, and all the other countries that you know were colonizing various other countries, despite the fact that they allegedly released those colonies, um, they still somehow laid claim upon those former colonies, right? Which is why I keep on and on saying that it was a bit of a farce when the UK, France, and such countries, when they said, "Oh, okay, yeah, we're no longer colonizing these countries." Okay, but the truth is that they have somehow the other still kept a strong hold on those former colonies because they never intended to completely let go of them. We know a lot about the British looting and plundering of the of the subcontinent and of various African countries. I mean, hello, they haven't even left the mummies alone of Egypt. What else do you expect of them? And as I said, their right hand man, the Americans, they kept up the tradition of looting and plundering in Hawaii. They did it in Iraq. They did it in they've unsuccessfully tried in Iran recently, and they have done it in Palestine with Israel. So the tradition, the white man's tradition of looting and plundering other countries, it continues. But today we're going to focus on France because if you remember, between 2024 till date, there have been various movements by the African countries that united against France and united against the ongoing colonialization, you can say, of their trade, of their defense, and of their mineral resources, right? So we are going to kind of look through them, okay? So we're going to talk about human rights abuses. We're going to talk about child deaths in Africa. We're going to talk about weapons and defense industry, and we're going to talk about militia, and we're going to talk about how the French have been heavily involved in all of these. So key recent controversies from 2024 to 2026 that were, put forward. We have the Orano mass crimes allegations, which is Niger 2025. In December 2025, I've put together these notes, so bear with me if I pause in between, okay? In December 2025, the Nigerian government accused the French state-owned nuclear group Orano. In other words, there is a nuclear group called Orano, which is owned by the French state, and the Nigerian government accused them of mass crimes and environmental fraud. Authorities claimed to have discovered an illegal dump of about 400 barrels of radioactive material with radiation levels dozens of times above safe limits, posing a severe threat to public health. Now, the Orano denies the claims, but the local activists in Arlit have long attributed high child mortality and chronic illnesses to decades of uranium mining. Okay? Now let's come to Mozambique 2024. This was the Total Energies massacre allegations. Here, a major investigation published in late 2024 detailed atrocities at a gas plant in Mozambique owned by Total Energies. The report alleged that a local military unit contracted by the French giant for security abducted, raped, and killed civilians, including villagers fleeing conflict, in the summer of 2021. Lawmakers and human rights groups have called for an independent investigation into these fortress atrocities. Now we come to the General Africa Study 2025, which is about the child mortality linked to mining pollution. Okay? A 2025 study highlighted that children living downstream from industrial mines in 26 African countries, 26 African countries, face a 25 increase in mortality rates due to water pollution. The research suggests that the local costs of mine openings, often operated by multinational firms, include significant child health risks that intensify during periods of high mineral prices. That is a point to be noted, by the way. And this was, you can find various sources here for this, by the way. Now, ongoing issues with child labor and conflict. We're going to come to one of the things that actually led me to talk about it in my previous podcasts when the African nations were uniting against it, but still, this is also what made me feel that no, I need to do a specific podcast all over again on this whole France, having a stronghold on its former colonies and how it has still been abusing them. And that is the DR Congo, 2025. The United Nations confirmed summary executions of children by the Rwanda-backed M23 militia in early 2025. Now, while not a direct French corporate action, these militias often control artisanal mines that feed into global supply chains. Okay? Then we have the illegal mining in South Africa, 2025. Investigations in May 2025 revealed widespread child exploitation and sexual abuse in illegal mines, where children as young as 15 are trafficked from neighboring countries. Then the artisanal gold mining, Cameroon, West Africa. Thousands of children continue to work in hazardous makeshift gold mines, sacrificing their education and health. In Nigeria, unsafe artisanal practices have previously led to hundreds of child deaths from lead poisoning. Okay? Now, once we have understood this, we are now going to move on to the pushback. Okay? The pushback against French trade and mineral resource control solidified on January 29, 2025. I think most of us remember this because, as I said, this is what alerted the world to the ongoing atrocities. This pushback was what alerted the world. When Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger officially finalized their withdrawal from the Economic Community of West African States, which is the ECOWAS. This move was the culmination of a year-long exit process by the Alliance of Sahel States, the AES. It is a confederation that was formed in 2023 to dismantle Francophonie. Okay, so Francophonie is the Franco-Africa, in other words, this is the decades-long system of French economic and political dominance in West Africa. Now, the key actions of this unified pushback, we're going to go through them, okay? The mineral export restrictions. Since 2023, at least 13 African countries have implemented curbs on raw mineral exports to force local refining and value addition. Notable examples include Burkina Faso, which nationalized 2 gold mines and stopped exporting unrefined gold to Europe in early 2025. And I remember how Europe really tried to fight against it. Then we have Niger, who suspended uranium exports to France following its 2023 coup and entered negotiations in 2025 to redirect these resources to Russia. Then we have Zimbabwe and Ghana. They implemented bans on raw lithium and bauxite to prevent plundering by Western and Chinese firms. Then we have the rejection of the CFA franc. The CFA franc or franc, this was the AES nations who have vocally rejected the CFA franc or franc, a colonial era currency pegged to the euro and controlled by the French treasury, signaling plans for a new sovereign regional currency. Now, the expulsion of the French influence. By early 2025, these nations had expelled French military forces, shut down French state media, and officially abandoned the international organization of La Francophonie. Okay? Francophonie is, let's just put it as the French version of the Commonwealth. Put it this way. Yes, all the former colonies of France, joined together in Francophonie. Now, African Union Green Mineral Strategy. Beyond the Sahel, a broader continental movement emerged in December 2024 when the African Union launched the African Green Mineral Strategy. Now, the whole point of this strategy was to shift the colonial economic structure, and I'm quoting this, the colonial economic structure, where Africa merely extracts raw materials for Europe, instead mandating local processing to create jobs and industrialize. Now, who, you might ask, actually led this whole united action against France? This united action against France, specifically through the formation of the Alliance of Sahel States, the AES, and the official withdrawal from the ECOWAS on January 29, 2025, was led by a trio of military leaders from the Sahel region. We have Captain Ibrahim Traoré from Burkina Faso, and currently he is the chair of the AES Confederation for 2026, having taken over the rotational leadership from Mali in 2025 December. He has been a vocal critic of imperialist influence, as we have all been well made aware of. I mean, on social media, it has been pretty viral. And he oversaw the nationalization of gold mines, which was a very good move, by the way. He was applauded for that. The second person in the trio is Army General Assimi Goïta, who is from Mali, and he served as the first president of the AES throughout 2025. He hosted the landmark summits in Bamako that formalized the break from the French economic structures and launched the joint AES television network to counter Western narratives, which was a very smart move, by the way. And the third person is General Abdurrahmane Tichiani. He's from Niger. The leader of Niger's junta, who spearheaded the suspension of uranium exports to France and the expulsion of French troops. He famously describes ECOWAS or ECOWAS, as a threat to member states due to its perceived alignment with Paris, which is actually a point to be noted. So, what are the achievements under their leadership? We managed to get economic sovereignty because they inaugurated the BCID AES, Confederal Bank of Investment and Development in Bamako, in December 2025, with nearly $1 billion in initial capital to fund regional projects independently of Western financial institutes. This is how serious they were, okay? Unlike leaders like ours in Pakistan, who are hired mercenaries of the West anyway. And this is why you can see the Western governments have a problem with leaders who work for the national interests of their own countries, because it automatically goes against the national interests of the Western countries, who are basically still sitting here to loot and plunder. Now, the trade and movement. They launched a common AES biometric passport in early 2025 to replace ECOWAS travel documents, signaling a permanent departure from the French-influenced regional bloc. Now, military autonomy is another achievement. The leaders established a 5,000-strong unified military force. This is the FUAES in December 2025, headquartered in Niamey, Niger, to handle regional security without relying on French or US forces. So, as of now, we want to know how much of this succeeded, right? In all their endeavors, in all their efforts, how much of this succeeded. So as of April 2026, the AES, the Alliance of Sahel States, the AES nations, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, have largely succeeded in breaking France's military and diplomatic stronghold through complete economic independence. Remains a work in progress. Okay? So, how have they largely succeeded? Let's look at defense contracts. A near total break. France has lost its military stronghold in the core Sahel region. Expulsion of troops. France has completed the withdrawal of its forces from Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. Even historic bases in Chad and Niger, even the historic bases in Chad were handed over in early 2025, which is quite an achievement. The AES nations have replaced French military cooperation with new partners, so they have formed new alliances, most notably Russia via the Africa Corps, formerly Wagner, and China, who now provide security, training, equipment, previously monopolized by France. This was again a huge achievement because it was so badly monopolized by France that France literally dictated, including the weapons. They even dictated which weapons to buy, and again to buy only from France, and how which military equipment to use, and again who to buy from France, obviously. So this has been broken off. Now, unified command is another success that they've managed to achieve. The leaders established a 5,000-strong unified AES military force in December 2025, as I said, to manage regional security independently. Now, we come to minerals. This has now become more towards nationalizing resources. So the stronghold on minerals by France has been shattered by aggressive nationalization and permit revocations. Again, we'll go through that as I've said it before, but this is just to see how much they've achieved, right? So like Niger with its uranium, in a major blow to French energy security, Niger revoked the mining license for Orano at the Imran. Here I'm going to make a mispronunciation. It's Imuraren mine. Okay, one of the world's largest mines in June 2024. So by June 2025, Niger unilaterally nationalized the Somaire mine, leaving Orano without operational control. Don't you wish our government made such moves? No, our government decided to go inside an MOU with America so that they can loot and plunder resources of rare earth minerals from Balochistan. Now, Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso's hold was gold. So the government of Burkina Faso nationalized multiple gold mines and halted unrefined gold exports to Europe to prioritize local refining. Now, France's pivot. What is France's pivot here? Recognizing the loss of these resources, France has pivoted to new partners, signing major mineral agreements with Nigeria and Greenland in early 2026 to secure lithium and uranium. But mind you, if you remember, Nigeria was the one who was also most vocal in a lot of restrictions that it decided to put forward with France. Now, when it comes to trade and currency, how much did they manage to achieve? While political ties are severed, economic disentanglement is complex. So, if you remember, we talked about the CFA franc. Now, the AES nations officially launched their Confederal Investment Bank on January 2026 as a cornerstone for a new regional currency intending to replace the French backed CFA franc. But this is now where we come to them still being in the process, because you have the corporate presence. Despite the political rift, roughly 200 French subsidiaries still operate in Mali and 45 in Burkina Faso. So while their monopolies are over, removing these firms entirely is difficult due to their deep integration into local infrastructure and the risk of job losses. When it comes to market share, France's economic influence is rapidly eroding. So, because Chinese firms are now coming in control, approximately 20% of the economy in former French colonies are now with the Chinese, while France's share has dwindled to just 4.2%. So, in summary, if we look at it all, we can say that yes, the AES nations have succeeded in reclaiming sovereignty over their territory and resources, effectively ending the era of French supervision, though they now face the challenge of building stable economies while navigating new dependencies on Russia and China, which, as we know, can be equally dangerous. Now, in order to understand why the African countries had to unite and put a full stop to all of this, I think we need to understand that France was not a very good imperial, you can say, imperial state. Because if you look back into history even, France has been accused all the way from history till the present day of basically the same things, if you look at it. They've been accused of a wide range of colonial atrocities spanning centuries, primarily across Africa and Southeast Asia, right? Now, these accusations include genocide, systematic torture, mass killings, and nuclear testing. As we know, as Nigeria raised its voice about the environmental pollution and, the child mortality rate and chronic illnesses due to nuclear testing, basically, and due to the toxic waste that was left by it. Let's understand first the historical allegations, and then you will see how it has built up to the present. We'll start with Algeria, 1830 to 1962. If you know, this is one of the most documented eras of violence, where we had mass killings, up to 1.5 million deaths during its War of Independence alone have been documented, with some historians saying that it was actually more than 1 million deaths over the entire 132-year occupation, right? Then we have the Sétif and Guelma massacres, 1945. French forces killed an estimated 45,000 Algerians who were demonstrating for independence. Systematic torture. The use of electric shocks, waterboarding, and summary executions was a documented system, and I'm quoting here, system, during the Algerian War. Nuclear testing. France conducted 17 nuclear tests in the Algerian Sahara between 1960 and 1966, resulting in radioactive contamination and thousands of civilian injuries. And so you see, even after relinquishing its hold over the colonies, it literally continued to do such things in Africa, which is why Nigeria and the other countries raised their voices. Rwanda, 1994. While not a colony at that time, and this is again now where we're coming towards this front, that although it was not a colony at that time, France has been accused of overwhelming responsibility and complicity in the Tutsi genocide. Allegations include providing arms and training to the Hutu militia and using humanitarian zones to help perpetrators escape. Now, Madagascar, 1947. French forces brutally suppressed an independence uprising with death toll estimates ranging from 40,000 to 80,000 people. tactics included burning villages and throwing prisoners from planes. Cameroon, 1948 to 1971. This was a hidden war which involved the reported extermination of up to 400,000 people from the Bamileke ethnic group through bombings and systematic torture. Senegal, the Thiaroye massacre, sorry for the mispronunciation, 1944. Senegal, 1944. France, the French troops, they opened fire on West African riflemen, and I'm quoting here, this was their allegations, riflemen, who had fought for France in World War II after they demanded their rightful pay and pensions. You see that trend here? Yeah, just note that white man's trend here. Other notable crimes, slavery, obviously, as we know. I mean, this is one of their most, again, well-documented crimes. France transported approximately 1.4 million enslaved Africans to its colonies in the Americas, a system codified by the brutal Code Noir, which is Black Code. Indochina, Vietnam. Accusations include the Haiphong Massacre, 1946, where naval shelling killed thousands, and the 1945 famine that led to roughly 2 million deaths while authorities allegedly stood by. Cultural theft, which, as we know, all the white people, the Americans, the British, the Spaniards, the French, they are well versed in theft, cultural theft. And that is why we see the white European Jews doing the exact same thing in Palestine, calling themselves Israelis and committing cultural theft. Up to 90% of African art remains in French museums. Doesn't that sound familiar with the British museums filled with Southeast Asian art and history? Yeah. So 90%, up to 90% of African art remains in French museums like the Musée du Quai Branly, following systematic looting during the colonial era. Okay, the Musée du Quai is actually pretty famous. The people who are in Europe, they know that it does house a lot of African art. In late 2025, the Algerian parliament passed a landmark law formally declaring the entire period of French colonization a state crime. So, now that we have understood the past and the present, I think you have a better understanding when I keep on saying that, the French, the Germans, the British, even the Spaniards, to be honest. I guess the Spaniards are now not considered so much. I mean, we don't talk so much about the Spanish because they, at least if compared to the French and the British, I guess they haven't continued with their notoriety. They haven't continued with their looting and plundering of their former colonies. I think when they left well alone, and that was probably wise of them. Similarly, the Germans, when they left well alone, but not exactly, because again, you see, when Africa says that it is being looted and plundered till date, it does not just talk about France. It talks about Europe. Yes, France has a huge hand in there as the former colonial imperialist, but the point is that it's not just France, which means that the African countries, as we know, for example, if you look at diamonds, now Switzerland that calls itself neutral and it says it never took part in any of the wars and everything, and yet, De Beers, for example, your most famous De Beers diamonds, they're all illegally mined from South Africa. Switzerland, their top-notch, top-tier diamonds, again, illegally mined from Africa. So gold, diamonds, gemstones, minerals, lithium, uranium, these have all been mined from Africa, causing a lot of health issues, a lot of famine issues, a lot of illnesses, a lot of child mortality, which is the main concern here that has been voiced. In fact, it was the rate of child mortality and the mines that brought Nigeria, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, Senegal, Kenya, and all of them to the front, where they united and pushed back against France. And they said, enough is enough. We cannot allow you to continue killing our children like that. So, as I said, this is the white man's pattern. The white man never really knew how to fight. So they always sneaked in, they looted, they plundered, and they're still looting and plundering, all in their various capacities. Britain, through Israel and through America, is still looting and plundering from its former colonies. And the French, at least, are better. I guess you can say the French are better than the British in the sense that the French actually have the guts to do it directly instead of hiding behind two different other colonies to do their dirty work, right? But yes, this is where we stand today. So when you talk about, for example, Middle Eastern countries causing famine in African and Asian countries like Pakistan and, other African countries where these are agricultural countries, but diversion of, for example, water routes and, the harvest and everything, and, you know, just exporting them to the Gulf countries or the Middle Eastern countries after having leased all those lands and everything. Yeah, that's not the only thing here, because when in African countries, at least, they are somehow one way or the other trying to fight for the rights of their people. When they get serious about something, as you see, they really get serious, like how they kicked Israel out of the African Union. So and they have stood for Palestine. South Africa literally went, if I remember, it was South Africa that went and, literally charged Israel for war crimes in the International Court of Justice or the International Criminal Court. But what did the other Muslim countries do, and what did our country do, What has our government done? Because our government is not legit. That is where it comes to it. This is the problem. This is how the British and the French have always tried to monopolize, because they know that if they have people in leadership of their own placed in strategic areas of the bureaucratic machinery, then they can control these countries and continue to reap benefits. Because, as I said, Europe really has nothing of its own. Europe and America, if you come to think of it, they really do not have much to their name, do they? So they are so used to looting and plundering from other countries. And the fact that they are acting like this whole mafia, the fact that they're acting like these thugs, that is exactly what Europe and America are. They're the world, as I always say, they're the global mafia. They're the thugs. They're the villains here. And this is how they get exposed every single time. Sorry, despite the fact that they try to create those narratives and more fools their own people, I mean, as I said, the rest of the world actually knows what's what, but more fools their own people. But yes, even bigger fools our people, that we know the atrocities committed against us. We know how our own governments are used against us, but we're silent. And then we sit and wonder, sorry, yeah, and we sit and wonder that why is it that, things are happening to us in Pakistan? Well, things are happening to us in Pakistan because we're letting them happen. We've let them happen for 70 years. For example, right now, Israel destroyed an entire town in Lebanon with roots tracing to 3000 BC. But has anybody talked about it? No. Our own government is so busy right now destroying 3,000 houses, and about 40,000 residents have been displaced. And this is in Islamabad. There is this massive multi-phase demolition campaign ongoing by the CDA, most probably to do with probably the extension of DHA, or maybe the extension of some other godforsaken urban, project that they're planning. I don't know, urban development project. And these families have had these houses since the 1960s, okay? So decades of lives and memories turned to rubble. Like there is a Supreme Court stay, by the way, from 2015, which is being violated blatantly by the CDA. Why? Because obviously now the courts are useless. The courts do not exist anymore. Justice does not exist anymore. Everything is under the army. Everything is under the mercenaries that we have hired by the USA to sit on top of us. And this is in Badi Imam, I think. Yeah, I think it's Badi Imam, Islamabad, right? So this is what is going on. So our governments are too busy doing such shit to give a damn about what's really happening. And this is why, when we look at other countries and their leaders fighting for their people and their people standing by their leaders, it's a good sight to see. And this is why when we see the whole world cussing at us, that we actually had an amazing leader who was not just working for his own people, he was literally working for the whole world. And he's in jail, blinded in one eye. Now his wife is blinded in one eye. And we're just sitting applauding. We're just applauding at the fact that Pakistan has taken center stage in as a messenger pigeon, in the mediation, the sabotaged mediation between America and Iran. Kudos to us. This is me signing out. Khuda Hafiz.